Be careful, everybody be careful. I'm trying.
Were you surprised by the CBO score, sir?
Not surprised at all. Only in Washington, when you cut spending, do they call it
an
increase in the deficit.
Only in Washington, when you cut spending, do they call it an increase in the deficit, says the new House Speaker Mike Johnson. He's on board with the CBO's conclusion on one of his first orders of business, which is protecting the rich and corporate tax cheats from accountability by cutting IRS funding.
New Speaker Mike Johnson just revealed text that the Republicans plan to pursue, bill text that includes $14.3 billion in aid to Ukraine, but notably in aid to Israel. It does not have aid to Ukraine as part of this package, but notably it includes spending cuts to offset the cost of the price tag. What it would do is cut spending for the IRS, essentially spending that was authorized through the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act, a law the Republicans opposed, but it would cut $14.3 billion in spending from the IRS in order to pay for the package. That is a no-go for Democrats. In fact, I just talked to Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on his way back from the White House. He told me that obviously a pay-for like that makes it much harder to pass. He's referring to that spending cut that the Republicans are pushing. Also, he said, we believe our Democratic caucus, we should be doing it all together. Israel, Ukraine, the South Pacific. That tees up a huge fight.
Welcome to another political fight in Washington, where you have a Republican congressman using the country's plans to keep funding the devastating attacks in Gaza to kneecap money to the IRS meant to go after rich tax cheats. But since Speaker Johnson can't come right out and announce his secondary objective, he has to demonize the CBO as an organization.
I quoted the CBO and you went after them. They're nonpartisan,
Listen,
too.
the CBO doesn't have a lot of credibility here right now. Their analysis is wildly inaccurate in a lot of ways, and they don't always do appropriate analysis. And I think there's going to be some reforms in that arena as well as we go forward. We have to have dynamic scoring. We have to look at reality when we give estimates on what legislation is going to cost. And the CBO doesn't do that all the time. I mean, when they come out with an estimate on Capitol Hill right now, there's lots of eye rolling, typically. And that's a problem. And that's part of the problem we have with transparency and doing the American people's business in the way it should be done. And we are working every day. We're going to continue to work to reform these processes to make Washington work for the people again.
Notice how Johnson's criticism of the CBO wasn't based in actual examples of their ineptitude and dishonesty. As usual with MAGA Republicans, they expect support based on their opinions posed as facts. He said their analysis is wildly inaccurate in a lot of ways, and they don't always do appropriate analysis. Okay? That sounds like a dishonest agency. But what is that opinion based on? To the casual viewer, Mike Johnson expects them not to question his declarations, but just accept them as fact. And when pressed on his opinions regarding these effects of this increased funding, his flimsy conclusions were exposed.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, why not just be honest about what the bill would actually do?
I am honest.
You said 87,000 IRS agents. That's not what it is.
Jake, that is exactly what it is. That is the Treasury's own published report in 2021 that they said, as you noted, over a 10-year period, they wanted to add 86,800 and something
employees,
agents.
And not agents, employees.
Oh, Jake, you know what all those positions are going to be? Have you seen that analysis?
So you're saying every one of the 86,000 plus is going to be an IRS agent? I'm
not saying every one of them, but I'm saying a large percentage of those will be IRS employees who are deemed as agents to go after and do audits. That's a large and a very important function of the IRS, and it's what they do. And that's not hyperbole. That's what's on paper.
Do you think that there is a problem in this country of wealthy individuals and companies not paying their fair share in taxes?
That has been a problem, of course, but we're not preventing that. The IRS has an important job to go after tax cheats, absolutely, and we support that. We're the law and order team. We want these things to be done properly, but what this provision would have had the effect of doing is making life harder for middle-class working families and small businesses, full stop.
The idea here is to convince Americans that aren't multimillionaires and billionaires who've never been exempt from the IRS hunting them down over $400 that this funding will result in increased scrutiny for them. And when asked about going after rich tax cheats, the talking points got jumbled up in Johnson's throat, leaving him with empty taglines like, we're the law and order team, and what I'm claiming is the truth, full stop. Advocates for more fairness and going after the biggest tax cheats have explanations to go with their statements about the effects of Johnson's bill. And the CBO determination, they would end up costing taxpayers tens of billions of dollars to continue to protect the wealthiest cheats. IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel said this: all those funds go to increase scrutiny on tax evasion going on at the highest wealth, and that is millionaires and billionaires, and large corporations and large complex corporations. When you reduce those audits, you reduce the amount of money that we can collect and return to the Treasury for other priorities. And the IRS said it's ramping up its efforts to focus on taxpayers with more than $1 million of income and more than $250,000 of outstanding tax debt. Starting in September, the IRS has started contacting about 1,600 new taxpayers in that category who collectively owe hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes. But most Americans don't have the time to dig into all this misleading statements that politicians make to achieve their actual goals of doing the bidding of who pays them. Wealthy individuals and corporations that want no part in being held responsible for their well-funded schemes that their own MAGA king, Donald Trump, has bragged about pulling off for decades.
Who knows the system? Who knows the tax codes better than me? Somebody said, well, did you pay a lot of tax? Very little. The reporter said to me, little. I pay as little as possible. It's an expense, right? That's the American way. I mean, you want stupid people? Yes, I pay. I mean, Romney was fighting so hard that he pays a lot. I mean, I pay as little as possible. I use every single thing in the book, but I pay as little as possible.
Maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So
that makes
if
me
he's
smart.
paid